There's nothing quite like a good rivalry in the NFL. But, unfortunately, not all rivalries are created equal. And sometimes these matchups end up being a beatdown rather than a, well, even match.
It's a throw end zone. It's picked. Intercepted at the goal line by Jalen Ramsey.
They say that sports are built on rivalries, and in many ways, this is true. Yes, everyone likes to see their team win the championship, but the reality is that only one team per year can win it all. But it's all the mini battles during the season that keep the fans coming back for more, knowing that more than likely, their favorite team won't be winning the Lombardi Trophy. In many ways, these long-standing back and forths between two teams are the lifeblood of fandoms, even if one team repeatedly dominates the other. And some of the matchups are honestly pretty damn lopsided. So let's take a look at 10 teams that have been repeatedly owned by the same team over the years. An easy place to start here is in the AFC East, where, let's be honest, the New England Patriots pretty much dominated everyone for 2 whole decades. But still, we would be remiss not to touch on what was one of the best examples of pure domination the NFL has ever seen. And that, of course, would be the roughshod that New England has run over the Buffalo Bills with over the years. And until New England can find a consistent answer for Josh Allen, it looks like the Bills will continue to eat away at that deficit in the rivalry. Now, before any Bills fans start getting up in arms, yes, we know that it looks like Buffalo has turned a page, and until New England can find a consistent answer for Josh Allen, it looks like the Bills will continue to eat away at the deficit in the rivalry. Because even with a 47-17 playoff victory to cap off a 4-1 record against New England to start the 2020s, it's gonna take a whole lot more winning for Buffalo to ever find its way back to 500 against the Pats, let alone taking the lead in the series. After all, they entered the 2022 season having a 47-77-1 record against New England. The fact of the matter is that the Patriots have absolutely dominated the Bills. And just because the Bills are on a little bit of a hot streak does not mean we can overlook 62 years of backbreaking history for the team. I mean, just think about it. Until January of 2021, when Josh Allen snatched that record back, Tom Brady had more wins at Highmark Stadium than any other quarterback, Bills QBs included, dating back all the way to 2001. That's a pretty insane stat that really speaks to how significant of an edge that the Pats have had over the Bills. There are a couple of other instances where one longtime division rival has had a comfortable edge over its counterpart throughout the years. Let's check out another 62-year rivalry that is as lopsided as it is rich with history. That between the Washington Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, what's interesting about this one is that both Dallas and Washington have had their fair share of success over the years, and they are both generally considered to be 2 of the cornerstone franchises in the NFL. It just so happens that both teams have been overrun by organizational chaos during the past 20 or so years. But it wasn't always like this. Nevertheless, I say this to say that considering all the success that both sides have had, it is a little bit surprising to see just how dominant Dallas has been over their foe. They entered 2022 with the all-time series lead at 75-47-2, right in the same neck of the woods as the Patriots mark over the Bills. I mean, there was a stretch between 97 and 02 when Dallas won 10 straight matchups between the two teams. That means there is a whole generation of Washington fans who went 5 years without beating wrinkly old Jerry. Think about how much changes in 5 years. There's probably a very specific group of Washington fans that went to college in Texas and were eviscerated by their homegrown peers all football season for their entire college experience. Dallas also holds the edge over Washington for the most lopsided head-to-head victory, having smacked Washington 56-14 in 2021. Now, the AFC North actually has a couple of these somewhat pitifully one-sided rivalries too, but I would say none exemplify domination to the same extent that the Steelers have against the Bengals. Pittsburgh, quite frankly, has abused Cincinnati since their first fateful meeting back in November of 1970. It's safe to say that Pittsburgh really set the tone for the next 50-plus years with a dominant 21-10 victory over Cincy. Now, that being said, the early years of the rivalry were actually relatively balanced compared to the bigger picture. The Steelers won 5 of 8 during the first 4 seasons, but things started to take a dark and scary turn for the Bengals in '74 when the Steelers began absolutely terrorizing them. And really the rest of the NFL, as its Steel Curtain-led dynasty started to take form. Between '74 and '79, the Steelers won 4 of the 6 Super Bowls and posted a 9-3 record against their striped AFC North neighbors. And to make matters worse for Bengals fans, in addition to the cumulative numbers painting a very nasty picture of where they stand in the rivalry, there have also been a number of important games between the two, playoffs or otherwise, that have panned out in downright embarrassing fashion. Like the 2005 AFC wildcard game, when Cincy found relevance for the first time in what felt like an eternity, and even jumped out to a 17-7 lead, only to have the Steelers score 24 unanswered points en route to an eventual Super Bowl title. Or what about the 2015 AFC wildcard game when the Bengals utterly imploded, committing a series of boneheaded and really inexplicable penalties that handed the game right back to the Steelers. Though the Bengals are fresh off a Cinderella Super Bowl appearance and seem to be trending in the right direction with Joe Burrow under center, you kinda have to wonder if it seems too good to be true. Because there was a similar sentiment when Carson Palmer came to town and started building some momentum, only to have it all melt down in horrific Bengals fashion. Well, let's hope that for the sake of the Cincinnati faithful, that history doesn't repeat itself. Not too dissimilarly, over in the NFC North, the Minnesota Vikings have had their way with the Detroit Lions, posting a 79-40-2 record thus far. I think what's even more depressing for Lions fans is that Minnesota has not only rolled them at home, but the Vikes also have a healthy record playing in Detroit. Having a hated division rival notch a 36-24-1 record on your home turf has to stink. Now, to defend the Lions just ever so slightly, the numbers are a little skewed by 2 horrific decades in Detroit, those being the 1970s and 2000s, during which the Lions went an abysmal 5-35 against Minnesota, and were just a generally incompetent football team no matter who they played. Interestingly, the Lions do actually have one matchup that has historically been an easy win for them, which I'm sure hearing this is a breath of fresh air for a fan base that is used to being beaten down both on the field and by the sports media. The Lions are actually 19-6 against the Browns, which, in my humble opinion, deserves some shine. Not just because I want to take a little bit of pity on a diehard fan base, but also because I think that by having this edge, Detroit has safely differentiated itself from the Browns as perhaps the worst franchise in NFL history. Honestly, it was neck and neck between the two. I mean, they both posted winless seasons, but having that head-to-head advantage, the Lions are safe for the time being. Jumping back to Minnesota, the Vikings have actually had a rather impressive run against a couple of other NFL teams, just not with the same longevity of their dominance over the Lions. They don't play them very often, but the Vikings have owned the Houston Texans ever since the Texans entered the NFL in '02. Playing the role of Big Brother, Minnesota has continued to beat up on the NFL's youngest franchise every 4 years when the AFC South and NFC North square off. And Minnie is actually a perfect 5-0 against Houston. The Texans almost stole the first one. Back in '04, they pushed Minnesota to overtime, but didn't quite have enough to get over the hump. And that 6-point deficit ended up being the closest they've come in 20 years of existence. You'd think that if not by skill, purely by chance, the Texans would win one of those interconference matchups eventually. But if they're following the same trajectory of the Jets, which in many ways they have been, I would be very cautious. I mean, the Jets may need to start paying the Philadelphia Eagles dividends, because Philly has owned the Jets. The Birds have a 12-0 record against them dating back to 1973, which, quite frankly, feels impossible. Now, what makes it particularly bizarre is that this spans nearly 50 years and there has subsequently been a rotating cast of characters involved. Yet, every single time the two teams face off, Philly takes it home. And almost none of the games have been particularly close. The Jets have only gotten within a field goal twice, and a lot of the games have actually been blowouts, including the last two, which the Eagles have taken 33-18 and 31-6 respectively. The good news, however, for the Jets is that they have a couple of years until they have to travel back to the city of brotherly love for their scheduled beating. So maybe, just maybe, they'll have figured out the quarterback position by then and have a team capable of putting up a fight. Similarly, the Miami Dolphins have had plenty of success against the LA Rams. The two franchises first played back in 1971, a game which Miami took, and with that first game included, the Fins have racked up 12 wins to just 2 losses against the Rams. Miami also has a pretty significant point differential, having outscored the Rams by 102 points during the stretch. As far as the Rams' 2 wins are concerned, LA got the best of the Dolphins in '76 with a 3-point victory. And then again in '01 when the greatest show on turf was going scorched earth across the league. I suppose the Rams can get some extra credit for that '01 victory since it was a 42-10 thumping. But I mean, still. It's a pretty tough look for the Rams. You have to wonder if the Rams players are too tempted by the Miami nightlife when they get down to South Beach. When they called St. Louis home, the players were definitely desperate for some action and some warm weather. And now that they're back in LA, I can see the players who are used to the Los Angeles party scene wanting to compare notes with the South Beach experience. Now, last but not least, we have coincidentally 2 teams that have absolutely owned the Atlanta Falcons over the years, and neither of which are in their division. First, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who first decimated Atlanta way back in 1966 by a score of 57-33, which, by the way, I didn't even know teams could score over 50 points back then. But boy, did they make that a regular habit in the time since. 2 years later, they smoked them 41-21, and after a blip on the radar in 1970, Pittsburgh rattled off 9 straight victories over the Falcons, spanning over 25 years before a dreaded tie with Atlanta in 2002. All in all, the Steelers have posted a 4-2-1 record against the Falcons, and somehow the matchup has been even more one-sided than that record indicates. One of the 2 losses came in overtime, and across all the games between the 2 franchises, the Steelers have outscored Atlanta by 200 points, posting an average margin of victory of just over 2 touchdowns.
His second of the game, and this place is aflame.
Now, if that isn't true domination, then I don't know what is. Lastly, we have the aforementioned matchup between the Colts and Falcons, which somehow might have been even worse for Atlanta than playing the Steelers. Dating all the way back to 1966, the Falcons are just 2-15 against the Colts. And I think to me, what makes this one even more insane is when you dive into the context of their 2 victories. So the first came in 1998, and I will reiterate here, over 20 years after the teams first played. And this just so happened to be during Peyton Manning's rookie season, during which there were countless growing pains. And, well, the Colts were pretty awful, finishing the year at 13-3. As far as the second win they got against Indy, that one might count even less as it came in 2011 when Peyton was out with a neck injury, and the Colts were tanking for Andrew Luck. Indy was 2-14 that season. So basically, unless the Colts were having a historically bad season, the Falcons had 0 chance at beating them, regardless of the coaches, quarterback, or even the decade. But which NFL rivalry do you think is the most one-sided? Was there anyone that we missed? Join us in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.